In this video, I'm going to go over how to turn type that looks like this into type that has a wave style applied like this right here. It's actually super fast and really easy to do. So I'm going to start out with the basics of how to get this to look very quickly and then show a few more things to think about at the very end for people that want a little bit more in-depth information. So the first thing you want to do is make sure your character as well as your appearance windows are open, and just go to Window and then Appearance and make sure the checkbox is checked, and then to Window and then Type near the bottom, and then in the drop-down menu just have Character selected. If it's selected, there'll be a little checkbox right next to it. So I have them right here on my screen, so it'll be nice and easy to show what I'm doing. And the font I'm using for this is a totally free font called Alley Display. I will leave a link in the description to download it. It's from Font Squirrel, which is a really great resource for free fonts. And we're going to want to change the alignment of the type to center. So in your paragraph toolbar, just hit Align Center right here. Alternatively, in your character window, there should be another panel called Paragraph just to the right of character. You can go in there and select Align Center on that as well. And one more thing on the character window, right here there's a down arrow with 4 lines in it in the upper right hand corner of the box. If you don't see these options down here at the bottom, right now for mine it says hide options since they're being shown, but let's say this is all it's shown. Just click on this down arrow with the 4 lines, click it, and then hit Show Options, and that'll show all the different options we have to work with. That'll come in pretty handy. But on this particular font, the overall leading, which is the amount of distance between the baseline of each of these 2 different words, is too high. So right here on the character window, there's an option to set the leading. It looks like 2 A's stacked on top of each other with an arrow pointing up and down. We're going to want to make that number smaller, so I'm going to click the down arrow, and it will automatically adjust it to be a little bit more in line with what we're trying to do. So I'm going to try to get the spacing pretty tight here till it looks right around here. We can change that later on too. All this type will remain live so we can edit it nice and easy. And then all you have to do is go to Effect, and then Warp, and then Wave. And this will bring up the warp options. Make sure in the lower left hand corner here you check the preview box so you can actually see what you're doing. And as you can see, it very quickly applies a wave effect to our type, and it does a pretty darn nice job. I'm going to reduce it from 50%, and we're looking at the bend right here. Make sure under style it's set to horizontal. If I hit vertical, it has a much different effect. It's kind of a cool effect, but it's not necessarily what we're trying to achieve here. So have that on horizontal. Leave distortion horizontal and vertical off, and just change the bend to a number that you think is appropriate. I'm going to select 35%, since that should be pretty close to this one right here. And then I'm going to hit OK. So that's really the basics of this effect, and all you really need to do to get a pretty decent outcome. But to get it a little bit more like this one right here, I want to actually make sure that the word type and wave are roughly the same length. This effect works really nice if the 2 words are really similar in length. So using the type tool, which is T on your keyboard as a shortcut by default, I'm just going to highlight over the word type. And then there's 2 ways you can do this. You can either adjust the tracking, which looks like a VA with an arrow to the left and the right. So if I change the tracking up to 100, it'll just automatically space out this type. So right here, this already looks pretty darn balanced. Each of these letters line up pretty well. I'd maybe make it slightly bigger to make this line up perfectly, but there's an alternate method which I actually use on this particular one. So I'm going to change the tracking back to 0. 0 is the default for tracking, and right here it says horizontal scale, which looks like a T with an arrow pointing both left and right. Now I'm just going to slowly hit this up arrow and kind of watch this type until it looks like it's pretty balanced with the overall word wave. So right here this looks pretty good. I'll maybe make it 1% bigger, so this is at 115% right now. So there, these 2 words are looking pretty darn close to each other, and the overall effect is what I'm looking to achieve. And then the only other thing that you have to consider here is the kerning between the letters, which is basically the distance between each of these 2 letters. And I tend to do that through tracking. There is a kerning setting, but I find tracking to be a little bit faster. And remember that tracking is the one that's the VA with a left and a right arrow right next to it. It's right here on your character panel. So first I'm going to give a little bit more distance to the T to the V, and I'm just going to add maybe, let's say, 25 points of tracking there to give it a little bit more space. And then the P to the E is a little bit too far. And to change the tracking for just one letter, just highlight that letter, and it basically affects whatever's in front of it. So if the P selected, it'll change the distance between the P and the E. And I'll change the tracking on the P here to a -25, and then maybe even a little bit bigger, change it to a -35 to get a little bit closer. And then just make sure you keep doing that until the overall consistency between all these letters looks a little bit closer to being nice and evenly spaced out. But once you do that, you have a pretty darn cool effect applied to your type. And if at any time you want to change the overall look of this effect, just highlight your word using the selection tool. It's the black arrow, or it should be V on your keyboard as a shortcut. And then in the appearance window, which I told you to open up before, you can tell that on this type, there is a warp wave applied. So if I click on this little eyeball right here and turn it off, it removes that effect we applied to it. And if I click the eyeball again, it reapplies it. But at any time, you can click where it says Warp Wave, which will bring the appearance window back up with whatever appearance you set to it. Hit the little preview button in the bottom, And then you can go ahead and change the overall effect as much as you want. So if I want a much more aggressive wave, I can go ahead and do that. And then just a quick note on what these two do. The horizontal, you can see that it just changes the overall slope of this entire wave effect. So if you go to a negative, it makes it slope downward to the right. And if you change it to a positive number, it makes it slope upward to the right. So I'm going to change this back to 0. And then the overall vertical kind of squishes it. So if I do this, it's squishing it at the bottom at a negative number. And if I go like this, it squishes it to the top using a positive number. If I were to change the bend to a 0 and just have the vertical, you get a type effect that's very similar to the intro in Star Wars. So I can just go ahead and change this to say Star Wars, so you can see how that works. So this effect has more versatility than just as a wave, like an ocean wave form. It can do stuff like this as well. But hopefully this video was helpful to you, and if it was, please like and favorite. And if you want to see cool content like this every week, please subscribe. I do my best to produce new content for designers every week. Thanks for watching.